Afternoon adventurers. There are tons of spells in the new Player's Handbook 2024 that came out last September, and plenty of them have been revised from their old versions in the old Player's Handbook or in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So let's go over what those changes are. Now, I'm not going to be diving into the nitty-gritty of what each spell is and does necessarily, except as it pertains to the changes that were made. This is a comprehensive guide. I just want to point out what's different. And I'm not going to go over minor changes in the wording of things, like, for example, a lot of spells that allow you to use an action to do a thing turn after turn. Now say a magic action. I'm not going to say those things for every single spell. That's going to eat up tons of time. It's just going to be what's actually mechanically different. Without further ado, I've rambled long enough. Let's get right into the A spells. I always like the idea of the Acid Splash cantrip. Being able to hit multiple creatures with an at-will damage option has always been appealing to me, but now it's even better. It is a 5-foot radius sphere instead of just picking 2 creatures within 5 feet of each other. That is obviously better if you have lots of enemies grouped up, as rare as that may be in fights. At least we have the option now. That's really good. It's also evocation now instead of conjuration, and that's important mostly for evocation wizards, but it's a nice change nonetheless. Alter Self is largely the same as it always has been. We can transform ourselves in all the usual ways. The main difference is that the natural weapon the spell gives us is not a +1 sort of natural weapon anymore. It doesn't gain that bonus to attack and damage rolls. I'm not really sure why they took that away. I understand the wording change to not specify that the natural weapon is magical, because that's a thing that's going away. Creatures don't have resistance to the magical bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. It's just they have the resistance or they don't now. But why they took away the +1 bonus, I'm a little unclear on. Granted, I've never seen someone actually cast the spell and then walk up to people and hit them with claws or teeth, so maybe it's not that important anyway. Animal Friendship got a little bit of a buff in that there is no longer an intelligence cap on the creatures that you can affect with it. It used to be that creatures with an intelligence of 4 and higher couldn't be affected by the spell. Not the case anymore. So this is going to work on all beasts throughout the whole game. Animal Messenger now has a charisma saving throw for some reason. It no longer just automatically works. I don't know how often people fight tiny beasts in combat, but maybe the idea was to take away the ability to just remove an enemy from combat. That's my best guess. In any case, it has a charisma save now. Most tiny beasts aren't going to be able to succeed on a charisma save against a spellcaster's DC, at least not without a high number on the D20, so probably not a big deal. Animal Shapes no longer requires concentration. That is a huge bonus. It is basically a mass polymorph without actually saying mass polymorph, and it allows you to turn a ton of creatures into CR4 beings, even if they weren't already CR4. Like most transform effects in this new Player's Handbook, the spell now gives temporary hit points instead of replacing the hit points of the creature you're transforming. Creatures you're transforming, I should say. And the spell ends on a creature when that creature is out of temporary hit points. The creature can also end the effect as a bonus action, which is good if you transform, say, a town full of people into horses to haul a bunch of cargo a distance, and then they want to turn back into people again. They can do that. Animate Dead now specifies that if you don't command the undead you've raised with it in combat, they will take the dodge action. That is kind of a minor increase considering they have pretty low AC, but it may help them not get hit, and it's nice that they do something now instead of vaguely protecting themselves. The spell also says that they will move to avoid danger, so take that as you will. Animate Objects animates fewer objects, and they have a unified stat block instead of having a bunch of different strength and dexterity scores. They now have all the same stats. They use our spellcasting ability modifier for their attack rolls, and they add our spellcasting ability modifier to their damage. Their damage is determined by their size, of course. Large creatures count as 2, huge creatures count as 3, and we can animate as many as our spellcasting ability modifier also. Which means the higher we get that spellcasting ability modifier, the more objects we can animate. I don't usually mention magic items in these videos because they're usually not that pertinent, but the Tome of Understanding, Tome of Clear Thought, and Tome of Leadership and Influence can increase our wisdom, intelligence, and charisma respectively, meaning we can animate more objects with this spell. If we have a 20 in our casting stat and we read one of these tomes, now our stat is 22. That's a modifier of +6. That means we can animate 2 huge creatures if we want, or 3 large creatures. The other change the spell got is that upcasting it with a higher level spell slot now increases the damage that each object deals by 1 die. That means if we cast with a 6th level spell slot, for example, our huge creatures are going to be doing 2d12 plus our spellcasting ability modifier instead of 1d12. Antipathy, sympathy, antipathy/sympathy, however that's supposed to be pronounced in spoken word, cannot target areas anymore. It has to target an object or a creature, which is a little odd, but they did increase the radius of the effect to 120 feet from 60 feet. So it is bigger and better. The material component also changed for whatever it's worth. Most people just use focuses or component pouches anyway, but if you're into this sort of thing, now it just requires a little bit of honey mixed with vinegar for both effects. They don't have different material components for the sympathy and antipathy effects like they used to. Arcane Eye has been buffed in that it is now only a bonus action to move the eye around, and they've also removed language about being unable to move the eye to different planes. So now, ostensibly, you could have the eye cross a portal into somewhere else. And last, not a change to the spell itself, but I do want to mention the Warlock Invocation to cast the spell at will is now only level 9 instead of level 14 or 15, whatever it was before. It is now only level 9, which is a huge bonus for Warlocks. Arcane Lock has changed substantially. Now, the locked object cannot be unlocked non-magically. It used to only increase the DC by 5 for lockpicking and breaking. Now it doesn't seem to affect breaking the object at all, so you can still kick down the door just fine, if I'm reading it right. But you can't pick it at all. Also worth noting, the spell doesn't specify that it's suppressed by knock anymore. Now knock says that. So the creatures that have knock on their list and can cast it are more likely to know that that's a thing they can do, which is a good change, I think. Kind of would have been nice to note it in Arcane Lock's description as well, but it doesn't matter. Here we are. Arcane Vigor is brand new, a spell that allows us to cast a 2nd level spell to use 1 or 2 of our hit dice at our spellcasting ability modifier and heal ourselves for that amount. It is on the Sorcerer and Wizard spell list, classes that don't usually get things like Cure Wounds, which is, I see what they're going for, but there are ways to get 1st level spells, and Cure Wounds is just objectively way better because it doesn't cost a spell slot and our hit dice. And there are also ways to use our hit dice, like the Healer Feat, that don't take a 2nd level spell slot. I don't really see myself casting Arcane Vigor pretty much ever. The one niche use I can see for it is if a sorcerer is wearing a Bloodwell vial, which again, mentioning magic items, which allows us to restore 5 sorcery points when we use a hit die to heal, so having a spell that lets us do that is actually pretty sweet. Is it worth it? I don't know. Even if we have Barbarian levels for whatever reason, and we have D12s for hit dice, this is still going to heal less than a 2nd level Cure Wounds at 4d8 plus spellcasting ability modifier. But I guess the spell exists, take it or leave it. Armor of Agathis is now only a bonus action to cast, which is great. If we're starting a fight and we gotta set it up, we can still use our action for whatever we normally would. Obviously, there's still that 1 leveled spell per turn rule, which is actually how that works now. But we can still cast a cantrip, make weapon attacks, whatever it is we would normally want to do on our 1st turn with our action. They've also changed the language in this one from when these hit points are gone, the hit points from the spell ends. Now it just says if you run out of temporary hit points, the spell ends. So there's an argument that something like Power Word Fortify or even Polymorph that gives us temporary hit points could potentially extend the life of the spell. Not past the hour duration, of course, but could at least help keep it from ending early. Astral Projection has a couple of important changes. The duration is now until dispelled instead of special. So they've removed the language about being able to end the spell with Dispel Magic, as used to be in the text of the spell, because the spell now says until dispelled. I'm stressing this because it is unchanged, even though it looks like it may have changed. It works the same as it always did. The spell's description also removed language about other targets being trapped in the astral plane and having to find their own way back should the caster die and return to their body. That's no longer in there. They can still end the spell, and the caster can still end the spell in the normal ways. Augury is a bit better in that if you cast it more than once per long rest, now there is a chance for the spell to simply fail instead of to give you a wrong answer or a false answer. So that's better. A little less funny, maybe, but better. Aura of Purity had language removed regarding curing diseases, as that is a thing that's going away in the game. Diseases just aren't going to be a thing. But for now, if your party is dealing with diseases, I would still allow this to remove those diseases like it always has, because a lot of older content was written with disease curing in mind. So I would recommend still allowing the spells and effects like Lay on Hands that used to cure diseases to still do so. And last, the almighty Aura of Vitality. It is way stronger now in that the heals that it gives off do not require a bonus action at all. They just happen at the start of our turn, every turn. So we can use both our action and bonus action to do whatever we want, which is great for paladins, obviously, because smites have changed in that they are now a bonus action when you hit a creature. So we can still use Aura of Vitality and smite if we want to, or whatever it is we're doing. I do want to mention before we move on, Aura of Vitality unfortunately doesn't really benefit from Disciple of Life anymore. That used to be an incredibly powerful combination, and it doesn't really work anymore. The first heal does, technically, because Disciple of Life now applies its bonus only on the turn that you cast the spell, so the first heal will have that bonus, the rest won't. The spell does still benefit very greatly from the extended spell meta magic, doubling its duration, because that will double the amount of heals overall. So that's good. Anyway, that's all for the A's. That was 15 spells that are revised and one brand new one that is questionable at best. But here we are. That's about all I wanted to say. Like and subscribe or whatever YouTube stuff, and I will see you in the next one. Happy adventuring!